you're going to find that your goalkeeper is going to become a lot more successful in limiting those chances.
Yes. And I think that what underpins a great goalkeeper that's competent in the three things we're going to talk about today is courage, is bravery, and the willingness to try and explore, especially at the younger ages, right? Like, no one cares if you win the Thanksgiving showcase when you're 12, right? But those skills that you learn at a younger age definitely translate to when you're a little bit older and you're like, well, I have experience now. I have experience. I made that mistake and I'm not going to make it again, right? Like last year, I forgot my wallet at home and I went to the airport and my life was miserable for that entire trip because I had to be like groped and patted down and it took an extra half hour to go through security. It was terrible. And you know what? I have not forgotten my wallet again because I learned my lesson and it was trial and error and I made a mistake and I definitely learned my lesson, right? And sometimes we don't know unless we try. We have no idea how it's going to go unless we explore. And I just want to remind everybody that you are safe to try things. You are safe to explore things. You are supposed to make mistakes. You are supposed to make, it is implied that while you're learning, that you're going to have some hiccups along the way and you're going to reflect and be like, that didn't really work out as what I initially thought. However, I made the best decision in the moment that I possibly could. Next time I'll be more informed and it is okay to be a work in progress. I still am. I'm going to be 40 next year. I'm a work in progress and we have to have some grace for ourselves. Yes.
Amen. Without further ado, let's get into this list. Number 1, what do I do?
Number 1, let's work on preventing opportunities by protecting the space behind our back line. So let's say that the ball is either with our team or the opponent has the ball somewhere in our team's attacking half. So our jobs become 3 things. 1, protect the space and behind the back line. 2, communicate to limit opponents' opportunities. And 3, position so that if our team does get possession, that I could be an outlet or support the attack, right? So what that implies is that if the opponent has the ball outside shooting range, I am in a position that puts me in a position that I can potentially come out and clear the ball, pass the ball, head the ball, all the things in phase 1. Or if they play the ball into that space, that I would then be able to drop and still protect the goal area, right? Because let's say I'm 40 yards off my line. If I don't win that initial ball, I'm not going to be able to protect the goal. So we want to find that balance of where can I position myself to be able to come out and manage that situation before it becomes very dangerous. But if I can't, then I still want to drop back and protect the goal. And I think that takes exploration. And I think it's different in each circumstance. But what's one of the most important parts is that when my job is solely protect the space and behind the back line, that my body shape wants to reflect that. So if I said to Tori, you and I are in a race, and we're going to race to see who gets to that ball first, how would you start that race? You would start probably something similar to Noah Lyles in the Olympics, right? You're in a sprinter stance. Your weight's on your front foot. You're ready to go forward if you need to, but you're also ready to drop if you have to, right? And this kind of falls in line with our first rule of possession, out of possession. It is prevent when I can, react when I must. So my vertical positioning, your vertical positioning might be different based on our skill sets and comfortability and team strategy, XYZ. But if I can prevent an opportunity, I want to do that. If it's within my skill set, if I have to, then I want to react.
I think this is huge. And it's something that, a lot of goalkeepers, coaches, whether it's at the youth level or even as kids start to get a little bit older in high school, their coach is saying, stand higher, come higher up, come higher up. But I think what holds goalkeepers back is they're not really sure what they're supposed to do there. There's a nervousness about when we lose possession of the ball, do I immediately drop? So I think this is a really great rule of thumb or outline for them of you're higher so that you can be an option in possession if our team regains possession, or you're higher so you can limit that chance, come out, but you're not so high that you don't feel like you can retreat if need be. So right. I think this kind of labels it out for them quite well.
Well, I also think 2 more things. I think that simply having a position that's a little bit higher and connected to the back line could potentially even deter a threatening situation because the opponent is like, well, the goalkeeper's there, so I can't play it in behind the center backs. So if I want to play it, I've then got to play it in behind the fullbacks, which is a less threatening position for us and a less dangerous area of the field for our opponents, right? Go ahead, have the ball behind my fullback, because that will give us time for our center backs to get back, for me to get back in a position, for us to delay the attack and then get numbers back behind the ball, right? The second thing is, one, not only does it deter potential dangerous opportunities, but also I want to make sure that I feel competent in the different types of final actions outside my box, because clear the ball isn't the only final action that we could choose. It is one that we certainly could use, but the balls that get played in could be different, right? So the ball that's played from out to in is more dangerous than, let's say, in a central position outside. So if the ball comes from out to in, it's on the floor. That's going to be different than if it's in the air. So I want to be able to clear it. I want to be able to take a touch pass pressure. I want to be able to pass it on one touch, potentially emergency slide tackle if I have to. I've even seen Katie spread outside the box the other day, right? Which I thought was very inventive, and just being comfortable with these different types of balls that get played will determine what type of final action that we need to have.
Yeah. I think it's super helpful, and the more you can explore with it too, the more you're going to find, oh, I never thought I saw myself doing that, but I know that it's a tool that I have.
Right. Well, I also think another thing that deters people from being a little bit higher is because they don't understand the principle of when to stay high and when to drop, right? So they're like, I'm afraid I'm going to get chipped. Well, why are you getting chipped in the first place? Right? Like the ball's outside shooting range. You're not really worried about them shooting, right? So you can be a little bit higher. Right. As soon as they play that ball and we recognize I can't get there first, that's your cue if you should go. Can you get there first and impact the ball? No. Then quickly drop to protect the goal. Then your job transitions from space defense to goal defense. And that's where I think people don't make that decision quick enough. So the ball gets played and they stay where they are because they're like, I can't get it. So they're not sure what to do. They stay, and then the ball goes over their head. And so we have to find that right balance of starting position, yes, but the decision to be aggressive forward, or the decision to drop back and transition to protect the goal. And that's where people, I think, falter, and this becomes a little unclear in our job responsibilities.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, honestly. And I think that's a whole podcast in itself is about, and I think we might have talked about doing this in the past, but like how not to get chipped. It's not as scary, I think, as people make it out to be, because you have a lot more control in that situation.
Yeah. I mean, I call college soccer and pro soccer every weekend. You coach at college soccer. You watch the program. I don't really see goalkeepers get chipped too often. Like in my recent memory, I can think of one time, and it was like last week. It was Shelby Hogan against Portland, right? Or in Portland against Utah. And it was in a 1v1 situation where she came out and she was in a space. Let's unpack something. This just came to my mind. Let's unpack no man's land.
I knew that's what you were going to say.
Let's unpack no man's land, because I think it is this mythical place that is very ambiguous and vague, and goalkeepers are like, what does no man's land mean? I've heard it. It's this mythical place that I don't want to be in, but what the heck does it mean? And essentially, when someone says that, what I think they're saying is that you're not in a position to protect the space, and you're not in a position to protect the goal. And that's what happened in that one play. If you go back and look it up, is the goalkeeper is not in a position where she can influence the ball in phase one, and she's not in a position to protect the goal. And so the attacker just goes right over top of her head. So, yes, but that's what that means if you've ever heard that before. And typically it happens because we're not understanding of what our job is in that moment in phase of play.
Yeah. All right. Well, because we could go on about this, I think, particular instance forever, we'll cut it there, and let's go on to part 2 with our topic at hand of shot prevention.
Okay, so number 1, protect the space behind the back line. Number 2 is protect this space in the goal area. So deeper crosses, end line services, shallow crosses, corner kicks, any of those services in the box. If we can prevent a header, a volley, a scrum, all these bodies in the box that potentially could take deflections and ricochets. We want to do that. So what becomes really important in protecting the goal area initially, what I think is the most important part, is our position. So many times we see goalkeepers just get like sucked to that near post.
Yeah.
And so then it makes it more difficult for them because they've got to travel a further distance to impact the ball. But the better we get at protecting the goal area, the further the opponent has to serve from goal, which makes their opportunity less likely to be as threatening, right? I don't want to face a shot 3 or 4 yards from goal if I don't have to. I want 7, 8, 9, 10 feels a lot better to me than 3 or 4. So the better we get at protecting the goal area, the more comfortable we feel at punching, the more range we're going to have, and we're going to force our opponent further from goal.
Yeah. I think this is one of the biggest areas of growth for goalkeepers that we work with. I don't know if it's just... Welcome to the Keeper Institute podcast. My name is Tori Corsaro. I'm a strength and conditioning and goalkeeper coach here at the Keeper Institute and your host for today's show. The Keeper Institute is a unique goalkeeper training facility in New Jersey aimed at developing better goalkeepers and better people. On this podcast, we will be discussing all things goalkeeping, character development, and more.
Hey guys, welcome back to another Keeper Institute podcast. It's Coach Jill today. I'm riding solo without Tori, but I am welcomed by a special guest, a goalkeeper who is a friend of TKI, who we care about deeply, who's amazing and going to share so much insight with you guys. Angel City's Didi Haracic. Excited, Didi, to have you on the podcast. I think you are. I can say this decisively, and I will stand 10 toes down on this, that you are the most mentally resilient goalkeeper that I have ever been able to work with and get to know. And I think that insight is going to go a really far way with some of our listeners.
Well, I'm stoked. Thanks for having me. It's been definitely a long journey.
Yeah, so let's get into it. So you are one of the longest tenure goalkeepers currently playing in the league. You have taken a bit of a different route than other goalkeepers that are established in this league. You didn't go to a big time, quote, soccer school in Loyola, and you have started with the Spirit Reserves. Can you just briefly give us a little bit of a insight into your journey to where you are now?
Yeah, I think there have been moments where I spoke about going to Loyola, and sometimes I have moments that I'm like, damn, why didn't I go to a bigger soccer school? But I truly believe like that paved the way to where I am today. And that resiliency that you say, I think it's just engraved in me. And don't get me wrong, there are days I struggle, but I think going to a smaller soccer school and not getting anything handed to me, I've gotten to a point where I just feel like if anything is thrown at me, I know it's a temporary obstacle, and I know that I could probably and will persevere over it.
So how did you, like, what was your club environment growing up? You're from Virginia, you decided to go to Loyola. Did you have other options? What made you decide to go to Loyola?
Yeah, club soccer, it was great. I played at the highest level. And from there, I knew the coach at Loyola, but I think also for me, I wanted to give back to my parents because they are a big role to kind of my character and my identity. So getting a full ride, that was the biggest thing. And also being able to play. And I knew the top soccer schools. I knew I wasn't probably going to play my first year, potentially even my second year. And I knew at Loyola, I would probably get all 4 years. And the first year, I will say, was a struggle. I didn't get it. But after that, like I got 3 years in my belt, and I think I grew as a goalkeeper. So I would say that was the main reason, playing time and obviously giving back to my parents and not having student loans. Who wants that?
Amen. Amen. When did you realize that like maybe playing after college would be something that you wanted to pursue?
I think my coach brought me in. So shout out to Catherine. She brought me in and she was like, hey, you're really good, and I think you can make it in the big leagues. And I didn't think anything of it. I was just like, okay, well, throw me into the draft. Like, I don't really know what's going on. And I actually wasn't drafted. And probably 2 or 3 days before my graduation, I get a phone call, and it was the goalkeeping coach at, back then, Western New York. And he was just like, hey, I'm the college coach at Niagara, and we always play you, and I love how you play. Do you want to come in for preseason? And that was in 2013, 2014, when the league, like, it was still kind of pretty new. And I went into preseason and I did my thing. Like, I've been a fifth string, fourth string, third, second. Like, I've just kind of paved my way through my entire NWSL career.
And what was that transition like? I mean, I think that's probably the hardest of any position to make the jump from the from a college program to the professional level. The game is just so much faster. You're playing with a variety of talent. How was that transition for you?
Well, funny story. The first time I walked into the locker room, I shook hands with Abby, and I'm like, "Hey, I'm Didi," and she goes, "I'm Abby," and I'm like, "Yeah, no shit." Like, I'm like, okay, well, but to like play with Abby and Carly Lloyd, like, those are two players that I always looked up to, so I thought that was pretty cool. But the transition was definitely fast paced, and I don't want to say it was a rude awakening, but I know I was humbled pretty quickly. And just from in terms of like shot stopping, and then now the game has grown into in possession. Like, I've just learned so much throughout the way, and I've been blessed to sit behind really good goalkeepers. And I think that that's the biggest thing for me. Sitting behind the top goalkeepers throughout the years, I've learned what to do, what not to do, how do I implement my own style. And I think that was the biggest learning lesson for me.
Who were the goalkeepers in that environment that you were in?
Gosh, back then it was Lydia Williams, Kelsey Weiss, gosh. And then I remember Chantel Jones
Oh
came
yeah,
over. Yeah, yeah, I've been through some. And then I remember I played behind Aubrey Kingsbury, Kaylin Sheridan. Like, I've
yeah,
just Steph LeBay. I sat behind
yeah.
some quality goalkeepers.
So how do you, I think this is like probably one of the harder parts of the game is, you're competing slash training with some of these best goalkeepers in the world every day. How do you retain your identity uh, without trying to be someone else, but also like keep your confidence without comparing yourself to someone else in that like environment that really mentally is so, it can be very fatiguing.
Yeah, I would say that is the hardest part. And that is something I've done my best to get a hold of. Because if you continue or start comparing yourself to other goalkeepers, I guarantee you you'll spiral. And I know I did at a young age. And now I literally have post-it notes on my bathroom mirror, and they all have affirmations. And every morning I write 3 things that I know I'm good at um, in my journal, and I write 3 intentions of how I want to go about the day and what I want to get out of training. Um, but to find my identity, I think I've grasped, and I know that I'm a really good shot stopper, and I know, and from the games that you've seen, I have so much composure because I've gotten to the point where making a mistake is okay. And I
Mm.
think once you accept that making mistakes is okay and they're learning curves, I think that's when the doors start to open up. So I think that was the biggest thing for me, where I just got to a point where I don't want to say I didn't care about making a mistake, but I felt comfortable with making a mistake.
Mm. What helped you come to that like radical acceptance of like if you really want to get to the next level and if you really want to seek out the highest ceiling of potential that you're going to have some stumbles and obstacles along the way and that's okay. What helped you get to that point?
That the next day is a new day. And I think the biggest thing is perspective. And as I've gotten older in life, it's just like you find perspective of that past, no one's going to think about in 5 to 10 years. And I think that's what it was for me. I was just like, no one's going to remember this in a week. Like when we play again, no one's going to remember this. So like it's just like mistakes are part of the game. It's 90 minutes. Like you're not going to be perfect. And I think that when you grasp that, I'm telling you, it just like opens doors and windows. You're playing more freely. And I always term it as this like fluid or my flow state. Everything slows down for me. The ball slows down, the pictures open up. It's just everything's in slow motion. And when I'm in my flow state, that's when I know that I'm playing freely.
Speaking of, I wanted to ask you about this. So I want to come back to your playing journey, your playing career, but I really want to ask you about this. So I get to call your games, obviously, and our cameras are always on you, like in your warm up, in your preparation. I'm like, oh, there's Didi. But I got to call your game live this year against San Diego, and so I got to see a different side of your preparation. And I saw you come out to the field really early, and you sat on the end line inside the goal. And it looked like you were doing some like deep breathing techniques. And like maybe this was like 2 hours or 90 minutes before a game. Can you just walk us through that process and like what that does for you?
Yeah, so I've been working with a sports psych for the past 4 or 5 years now. Um, and working with her, everyone has always said visualization is huge. And I think when it comes to soccer, physically for goalkeepers, it's not as taxing, but the mental side is, in my opinion, the most taxing. And that's where we're exhausted from organizing, from seeing pictures. And before a game, I like to walk around the field, and that's my moment of just like prep. And then when I walk my lines in the goal, the 18-yard box and the six, that's where I really prep and talk to myself and set intentions for how I want matches to kind of how I want the outcome to be. Obviously, I can't control the outcome of a game, but I can control the input and what I kind of give the game. And then once I sit down in the goal, I always start with a little prayer. And it's just always to keep myself and my teammates healthy. That is the first one. And then I get into my breathing techniques, which is a 3 count, inhale for 3 seconds, exhale for 3. And then after that, I start to visualize. So I'm probably in the goal for about 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And my visualization is putting myself in uncomfortable situations in a game. Because we can all do the comfortable things well when we're not under pressure. But once pressure happens, I think that changes everything. So for me, it's when I'm getting pressed with the ball at my feet, how can I continue to stay composed? And then it's also picking out or putting my teammates visually in my head where I think they might be.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like my routine before a game.
That's awesome. So I just want to back that a little bit with science. Okay. So actually, what you're doing is really important because when we feel anxious and when we feel stress, we actually lose some of our peripheral vision.
Yeah.
Think about yourself in a jungle and there's a tiger and that's your immediate threat. It doesn't matter that there's an elephant to your side, right? You're not going to see that. You're going to see the tiger. And so actually doing those deep breaths and that breath work helps you control your heart rate and brings you out of that anxiety state and allows you to see more of the picture, which obviously is very important to us when we're trying to scan and try to find where the opposition is, where our teammates are. But number two, the visualization aspect of it is for goalkeepers so important because we don't necessarily need a positive outcome in training to have learned something. We actually can trick our brains into being able to solve problems that we've never even worked on before by simply visualizing those scenarios. So what you're doing is scientifically proven to help goalkeepers. So if you guys take nothing else from this podcast, I hope you guys take that and explore a little bit more with the visualization, with the breath work, because those two things paired together can really impact your game without sweating, without grinding, without making it so difficult on ourselves, right? Like these are just ways to work smarter, not necessarily harder. But my next question for you is, those intentions that you set, can you give us an example of like a couple of those? Because I imagine they're not outcome, they're kind of process driven.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off what you said earlier. I also have put myself back into situations where I messed up. So, for example, like I'll put myself out there. I messed up against Louisville and I literally gave them the ball back. And I remember the next game, I put myself back into that situation and I asked myself, what would I do differently? And I solved it again. And I'm pretty sure I was put in the same situation and I handled it completely different. And it was better.
Yeah.
The success rate was better. It just depends if that works for you. For me, it does. Sometimes I do my best to put myself back into situations where I know I could have done something better. And it works for me. But in terms of the intentions, my top three, I think for the last game, sometimes I write composure, assertiveness, and braveness, or being brave. And I think those are all things that I can control. If we knew what the outcome of a soccer game was, I don't think we would be playing. So
Yeah.
for me, it's the controllables. And I know that I can only control my performance, and I can control my emotions. And I think everyone knows I'm pretty emotional in games, and I just enjoy hyping myself up and my teammates. But yeah, for me, it's little intentions. And I would say the biggest one, and I know I always start with it, is composure. Because if I can stay calm and composed, I do believe that trickles to my teammates.
I think composure is something that's like wildly misunderstood, actually. I think coaches will say, hey, you got to be composed in that scenario. And you're like, duh. Or like, you got to be confident in that scenario, right? But I actually think that composure is something that you earn on a daily basis. So putting yourselves in situations in training to be able to, let's just use in possession, for example, solve pressure, right? You get composure when you've experienced something time and time again, and you have some experience solving those situations. So how do you feel like you specifically develop composure?
I think exactly how you said it. I put myself in training in chaotic situations. And I think that's the key for me, for coaches, if they can try and do that. Can you put your goalkeepers in uncomfortable and chaotic situations? Because when a game happens, everything slows down. And then obviously when you get game experience, you're learning through the film sessions that you see after a game. So I would say those were the two biggest pictures for me, but in training, that's what it was. And I know when in possession, sometimes I do just technical stuff and it's without pressure. It's hitting the ball off a rebounder, open up, play, open up. And that's just repetition. And then from there, once pressure is involved, the technique doesn't change. And I think that's the biggest thing. People feel like once pressure is involved, you got to be quicker. Not necessarily. If your touch is good and your prep touch is good and it takes you into the space, like, you're going to succeed.
Mm-hmm. When did you develop this? Because like obviously I'm older than you, and that part of the game was just starting to become important. And I was already a pro when it was like really starting to become important. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my gosh, I really hope the ball doesn't come back to me, especially to my left foot. And I remember, being on the national team being like, oh my gosh, I can't show this element of my game in practice because then the coaches are going to think I'm not ready or prepared or good enough. And so I remember very much like not working on it and trying to hide my weaknesses. And because I did that, they never actually became improved. And I still continued to remain like fearful. So how did you evolve that aspect of your game? Because you mentioned that you were a great shot stopper in college and that you evolved in possession.
I would say it was a few years ago. I think when you see the game changing or going in a different direction, in order to keep up with it, you have to kind of pull out those little things that, I don't want to say you don't like about yourself, or that you need work on. And I get fearful, and I hate saying that, but it's okay.
Yeah.
There are moments where in a game, like, yeah, it's scary. I have the ball at the top of my six and I'm getting pressed by two forwards.
Right.
And
Right.
I'm just like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm just like, what's the worst that can happen? I don't know. It's just that
Yeah.
mindset you have to have of like, you got to play freely, because if you don't, you're not playing true to yourself. So I think for me, it's, if you're fearful, that means you're about to do something really good. and I've grasped that. And
Mhm.
I think that's okay. And I'm like all about pushing the limits and getting out of your comfort zone, because that is truly where you're going to learn.
Yeah. It sounds like, and I am a firm believer of this, like I started TKI, and the biggest and most important things to me are the mental side of the game, in possession, 1v1s, like the more nuanced aspects of the game, because that's where I really struggled was with the decision making. And it had to deal with my relationship with pressure and making mistakes, and also evolving to become more modern. So that's like a big part of our focus is understanding this like mental side of the game first and foremost as the foundation to every successful goalkeeper. Now, you haven't just your success has not been linear, right? Like you just haven't, played club and played college and then just went right into the pro game and just like balled out, right? Like it was a very different process, and one that most goalkeepers, I would assume, would have just thrown in the towel, because there were a few years after college that you had to remain so patient. So can you let's revisit your process of like, okay, you're at Western New York Flash, you don't get a lot of minutes, and then you go back to Spirit, how that whole thing transpired and how you continue to bet on yourself even when the odds were kind of against you.
Yeah. Can I revisit the last part? A word
Yeah.
popped, pressure. And I think people see pressure as a negative. And I don't know if you're very familiar with the US Open, Jill, but like I watch the US Open and tennis like no other. And every time the camera, when they're walking out onto the stadium, it passes a plaque. And I don't know if anyone has ever seen it, but it says pressure is a privilege. And Billie Jean
Mm-hmm.
King has said that. And I truly believe when you get to the highest level, there is so much pressure. But I truly believe when you're at that state, that means you did something good and you're continuing to do something good. And
Mm-hmm.
I've characterized pressure as opportunity, and it's opportunity to showcase your talent. And that's how I see pressure now. I get to step out in front of 20,000 fans and I get to showcase my talent.
Oh, I
And
love that. I
yeah,
just
and
wrote
that's
that
what I
down.
want
That's
to do.
so good.
That's what I
Yeah.
want to do. And every time I see that plaque, pressure is a privilege, I'm like, it is. And only a few can withhold and stand that. And I want to be one of those people.
Yeah.
But
That's
yeah,
so good. I feel
yeah.
like I need that as like a sign in my office or something. That's so good.
But yeah, my journey has been so chaotic. It took me officially like 6 years to get a contract in the NWSL. 2 years with New York Flash, and then going overseas for about 6 months and coming back to Washington Spirit. And it was just, I asked, and I didn't even want a contract at that point. I was just like, hey, can I just come in? Do you need another goalkeeper? And I was, like I said, I've done the fifth, fourth, third, second, first. Like, I've done it all. 6 years to get a contract. And I think for me, the biggest thing is I tell people I don't have to prove myself. I don't have anything to prove, but I truly love kind of shutting my haters up.
Like overcoming all odds.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
overcoming every single obstacle that someone throws at me. And I think I don't want to say I think, I know that's what separates me from other goalkeepers. I truly have came out on top on every single obstacle that's been thrown at me. And I do it, one, for myself, but two, for my family. I'm a girl from a small town now living in LA. Like, I do it for the little girl who had no opportunity to literally having too much energy, and her mom signed her up for soccer. And I still have too much energy, but like I don't know. I always look back at when I was a kid, and I do it for that little girl. And I know that there will be another little girl that's like, oh, I can do this from a small town and make it big.
Yeah. Oh, you have too much energy, and then you created your own coffee, which just, I'm sure, exacerbated that.
Yeah, that's how I start my mornings.
So, you went back and you played with the Spirit. That you eventually got a contract there.
Yeah, I got a contract probably my third year with Spirit. Fourth fourth year. Gosh, I'm losing track of my years now. But yeah, it was my full like 1 year contract, and I was so stoked. I was like, I just feel like a door opened and I broke through.
Yeah.
And then after that, I was traded to then Sky Blue, now Gotham, and I did 3 years there. Got to sit behind Kaylin, and I don't know, like me and Kay, like we went after it, and I know we're both like competitors, and I think that's what made me like really good too. And I texted her one day and I was just like, I just look up to you. Like we have that relationship now, and it's just like I've learned so much from her, and I would hope she's learned some from me. So I don't know, I just like I've sat behind the best goalkeepers, and I truly believe that's what made me really good.
So let's go back to 6 years that it took you to get a contract. That had to be so incredibly difficult, like to not see a finish line or to not see the top of a mountain and just continue to like seek a contract or seek, just probably some financial freedom a little bit at times too. Can you just like walk us through like what that process was and like maybe some of the self-limiting doubts or anything obstacle wise that you had to overcome?
Yeah, I remember there were a lot of heavy combos with my mom, and she was just like, do you think it's it? Do you think it's time? Like, just go find another job, go be a coach. But it's like, I couldn't say no. And I think it was because, like I said, I know I have something that I want to accomplish personally, and I won't move forward until I accomplish it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's why I never let go. Like soccer's a big part of my identity. I don't want to say it's who I am fully, but it's a big part of me. And I know that I have more to accomplish personally that I want to do. And there were definitely a lot of hard times. And I think the hardest time was going into Sky Blue or Gotham one year. And I thought it was it. I wanted to retire. And it was the year that I had a handful of games, and then it brought me into LA. And I think that was like the biggest thing. I just remember getting on the phone with my goalkeeping coach, and he was like, just give me 1 more year, see what happens. And I remember saying, I'm just kind of over it. Like I'm mentally just tired. Um, and I stuck it out 1 more year, and the universe did what just gave me a handful of games. And I was just like, okay, this is it. This is my opportunity. And that's when I started working with my sports psych, and I was like, pressure is an opportunity for me to just showcase my talent. And I remember every morning writing in my journal, build your resume, build your resume. Someone's going to see you. Until this day, I still write that, build your resume. And yeah, then I got traded over to LA, and I was the number one.
You were the number one. However, of course, knowing you, the circumstances aren't always easy. Angel City brings in another goalkeeper who has international experience with Germany, Almut Schütt, who's now actually in the league now. And everyone kind of thought like, okay, well, they're bringing this goalkeeper from Germany to be what, like a backup at Angel City. And the Angel City continued to rock with you, and you played some of the best games, I think, of your career at that point, even when someone was kind of like breathing down your neck wanting that number one shirt. Was there a specific process that you went through, like understanding and accepting the reality of the situation that allowed you to have those great performances?
Yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It causes anxiety. It causes
Yeah.
it, it it brings the little voices in your head start to turn. And I think if you can, before they fully start turning, if you can just nip them in the butt, and I did my best to do that right away. And from there, I've worked for 8 years, 9 years to get to where I am. And for me, it was, I will not let anyone take that away from me. Like that's I'm an 8 year project, 9 year project is what I keep telling myself. I wasn't an overnight success.
Right.
And that's what I was just like, I will not let anyone take this from me. And it kind of bled into my second year with Angel City and not starting the first 3 games. And I remember telling myself, I was like, I didn't start for 8 years. I didn't play for 8 years. What's one more game going to do? What's another game going to do? Like, I did it for 8 years. I did it for 9 years. Like, if anything, and that's why I go back to what I said. I feel like if anything is thrown at me, I know that I will definitely get over it, because that's what I did now for 11 years.
Great. So this whole experience, like soccer in general, has refined in you this incredible character. Like, I think you're such an incredible human being, like so talented, wildly talented goalkeeper, right? But your character is what helped you get to this point and sustained you at this level. How do you see your character impacting you, like, for the rest of your life?
I think I can impact others. I think my story can impact others. And it's in terms of, if someone needs a light, I feel like I can be that light for them, where you might be in the dark for 8, 9 years like I was, and then all of a sudden there's a breakthrough. So I would hope my story can do that. And I've always characterized it as a survival guide. Because I truly have been through the ringer, and there were a lot of dark moments in my career. So that's what I hope my story does. And like I said, it's for that little girl from a small town. It's for the people who are consistently doubted. And I don't know. I love the underdog. I love being the underdog. I've been in the shadows, and I love it, because when you come out of it, it's just, I don't know. It's awesome. It's a great feeling.
It really is, isn't it? I mean, someone asked me that the other day. I did a podcast, and they were like, "What was the best part of your your playing experience?" And I was like, "Actually, it came from some really crappy circumstances, right?
Yeah.
Like, broke my hand. Doctors say you'll never be back. Like some really heavy stuff. And I think people don't recognize how strong they are until they have to be strong.
Yeah.
Until our backs are against the wall, and it's either show up or pack it in."
Yeah.
And also, I think it would be important to normalize, those days where you're like, maybe this is it. Maybe I'm done. Maybe this is not what I want to do. And normalizing those thoughts. And I think one of the greatest parts about you, though, is that you continue to bet on yourself. And I think it is an indication of how you'll live the rest of your life with, like, more peace and more satisfaction.
Yeah. And I think I love that you said normalize these thoughts, because, like, athletes, we're not superheroes. Like, we're literally human, and I go through the same thing. Like, a few weeks ago, I got a DM, and someone was like, my daughter is anxious before games. Like, how do you, like, calm yourself down? And I'm like, I still get anxious before games. I still get nervous before games, and that just means I care. I care about the performance I'm putting out. I care about the performance of the team and the outcome. Like, I want to win. So even at my age, it's like, I'm still human, and I still go through the same things everyone else goes through. And I think the more we talk about it, I think it opens up a safe space in a room for vulnerability. And I truly believe that's what brings people together.
I couldn't agree more. I have one more statement and one question attached to it. Is, I think a lot of people think that if they get to this, then they'll be happy. Or I also think people don't realize that, like, everybody has their own hard. Like, hard is very relative, and every person, no matter if you play pro or if you play at the college level or if you make a certain amount of money, every single person has something in their life that is relatively hard. No one has an easy life. I think that's really important to highlight, because I think that line of thinking leads to, if I just played at Florida State, then I'll be happy. Or that will be the one thing that contributes to my professional career. I need to go to a high level college, because then I'll get to do this. Or then I'll get to be happy. Then I'll get to be satisfied with my journey. So I think that puts us in this position where we have aspirations, and those things are awesome, and we have goals for our life, and those things are great. But how do I stay present in the moment and almost recognize all that I have achieved to get to this moment while still wanting more, but be satisfied with whatever the outcome is?
I truly believe write it down. And I know it's easier said than done, but the amount of times I should probably write a book on like what I'm grateful for, because I have a list of everything. If you can find the little things in life, and the biggest one is the success, and that's what's so hard. Like, we're human, we always want more, we always want to achieve more. But if you can find those little windows of, dang, I've come so far, it puts you in that mindset of like the present moment. And I've accomplished a lot. Yes, I want to accomplish more, but like, my career is my career, and I've done a lot. So I think if you can write down your progress and where you are right now and what you've accomplished, I think it gives you more of this sense of peace.
One more question. I know I always do this. I'll say one more, and then you say something that sparks something. But I think that people probably rely on their performance to validate their worth and value in this world. So do you have specifically, it sounds like you're very introspective in terms of like your worth and your value. Do you have things that define your worth and value that are outside of how you perform on a weekly basis?
Yeah. I'm going to share a little story. When I get done with games, the amount of people that I feel like don't even talk about the game, when I go and say hi to them, they genuinely just say, I love you so much. Can you please just take a photo? And I remember when I did your camp in San Diego, I remember Levi just running to me, and we were like playing, rolling around the grass, and he hugged me. And I remember you sent me a photo, and I was just like, dang, it's the little things. Like,
Yeah.
Levi doesn't care about Didi soccer. Levi just cares about rolling in the grass and playing. Like,
Yeah.
and to me, that's like the biggest thing. Like, it's finding yourself and the human side of you. And that's what it's hard. Like, soccer, yes, it's my identity, but all of my friends know Didi as a human. They don't genuinely care about Didi as a soccer player, because they love me for who I am. And I think if you can find people like that to me is my outlet. So it's my friend group, it's my family, it's my photography, like, it's all of it.
Well, Didi, I think you just hit the nail on the head too. Is there's so much more to you than just football, right? You know, you are so passionate about art and coffee and people and joy, and I think that's another one of the pieces that make you a well-rounded goalkeeper and person, because your entire life doesn't hinge on how you perform every Saturday or Sunday. Well, thank you so much for joining us and giving us so much insight. I feel like I have some things that I need to reflect on. I have a game tonight, and I've been feeling anxious all day. So I'm like, okay, I need to write down 3 intentions for the game. What are my 3 affirmations? And remember that I'm not an overnight success, and that I've come so far, and I can rely on the things that make me who I am to unlock, my best performance. And if it's good, great. And if it's not, it's back to the drawing board.
Absolutely. My biggest thing is just stay weird, right?
Yeah.
Stay weird.
Well, Didi, all of our listeners who live in the San Diego area can probably, LA area, can go watch you play on a regular basis, hopefully next season, but get to work with you potentially this winter with us at our San Diego camp, which is going to be so much fun. But good luck in the off season. Enjoy it. You deserve some rest. I'm sure. Go surf or take pictures of surfers, whatever you do. All right, you guys, we'll catch you later.
Awesome. Bye.